Happy New Year's Eve. I want to thank all of our followers and subscribers on social media. Our biggest gains this year were on Instagram, where we broke 11,000 followers, and on TikTok, where we exceeded 360,000 followers. Tonight's story comes from my friend Amy. Last year, she made a post on Facebook asking if anyone knew anything about a strange figure she saw while driving through a remote area of southwest Colorado. When I saw her post, I immediately reached out and scheduled a call. Here's Amy's story.
I'm Amy from Colorado, the southwestern part. I've been living here for quite a long time in Colorado for about 8 years now, although 2 years in this area. I'm a big skier, snowboarder, mountain biker, runner. I really enjoy the outdoors, and I'm constantly traveling all over Colorado to find all kinds of fun activities to do. And basically, one time I was driving back home from a great ski day, and it happened to be super late at night, probably around 10:30 p.m. And I was a little worried because I have to drive over a pretty treacherous mountain pass. And it had just started to snowstorm. And I was lucky that I made it over the pass in time, but it was being so late at night, and just the weather made it pretty scary. But thankfully, I had just gotten over the pass, and I was finally down to the bottom of the other side, where it starts to flatten out. And this mountain pass is quite remote. There is a ski resort at the top, but it's about 8 miles from where I was driving. I'd passed it 8 miles ago. And at the area where I was at the time, basically there's a few ranches that are like 10 miles away. It's just very remote. There's one really, really extreme mountain bike trail that goes through the valley there. But basically there's not a lot of people for miles and miles, kind of deep in the wilderness. And basically I was driving along, and it was at the point of the road where I'd gotten through the mountain pass, but in it the speed limit goes from 45 to 65. And so I just started speeding up, but again, it was a really, really almost whiteout snowstorm. So I was being pretty careful. And it's a 2-lane highway, so pretty narrow road. And as I was basically almost down to flat ground, I all of a sudden saw a really large, what I at first thought to be man, just walking up the other side of the road. I was going down, and this person thing, maybe Sasquatch, was walking up the other side of the road, and it scared me so much because I had not seen any cars on the road when I was there, just probably because of the weather conditions. And it scared me so much because it was almost like on the road. If it would have been on my side of the road, I probably would have hit it. And I, being an empathetic person, was actually really worried at first, like, oh my gosh, like, why is this person walking up a mountain pass in a snowstorm? This is really odd. I thought back like, oh, did I pass any cars that were broken down that maybe I could help them? And it was just so bizarre. And I really could only make out that it was I thought it was a man because it was very tall and large, um, and really just steadily walking up the opposite side of the road. Um, and it freaked me out so much just because there is a gas station about 5 miles in the direction I was going. And I thought maybe, like, it's really odd because if someone is broken down, they would probably be walking towards the gas station, not up the mountain, where, to my knowledge, there's nothing for 8 miles in any direction. And also there is basically wilderness all around. Um, and it really just freaked me out for the time being, especially because I was alone. I didn't stop or anything, but for the next, I was probably about 45 minutes from where I live, and the whole time I was thinking to myself, what was that? I'm really confused. Why is someone out in this weather? It was the first big snowstorm of the season, and so any normal human being would definitely not be out at on a mountain pass at 11:30 at night in a whiteout snowstorm. And it wasn't until I started actually watching a few things online and just reading a little bit more about my area and just getting really interested in I guess the wilderness and around here, that it hit me that it probably was a Sasquatch. And honestly, when that hit me, it like all made sense because I was so baffled, like that there's no way it could be a human. And when I thought about how the location I was at and the time of night and just everything about how most sightings are on the side of the road, I'm just pretty convinced that what I saw was some kind of Bigfoot or Sasquatch creature.
Did you
Um,
have much interest in this before you had your sighting? I mean, had you looked into Bigfoot much before
yeah,
that?
I mean, it wasn't something that I was like, oh, I definitely think exists. But ever since I had been living in a part of Colorado that was a lot more populated at the time before this, and ever since moving out onto a ranch in Colorado where there's just tons of untouched wilderness, I started getting, just more interested in everything to do with the outdoors, and I stumbled across a lot of things, just stories of people and about this area, and then I started. I think it was I stumbled onto BFRO, and I read a couple stories, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I definitely think that's what it is. So honestly, it was kind of what really piqued my interest in this was because I had a sighting. I'm definitely an open-minded person, like, but I usually like to have, some kind of evidence, and this was a pretty big convincing factor for me, just because I have no doubt that a human would not be doing that at that time of night and at that location we were at. It was just so weird and baffling that honestly nothing else makes sense to me.
How big would you estimate this guy was?
I mean, when I was driving by, I definitely first thought it was a man because it was so tall, and so it had to be over 6 feet, and it was definitely a heavier guy. Like I could, even in a whiteout, I could definitely tell that it was like a figure walking on 2 feet. And I just automatically assumed it was a man because it was so large.
Right. You couldn't see hair or anything like that, though.
I couldn't, honestly, it was just a dark figure.
Right.
Um, but it did scare me so much. Like I said, like, I don't think anyone would be walking quite in the road like that. Like it scared me so much because I was like, oh my gosh, I almost hit this, I almost hit this person, but thank God it wasn't on my side of the road.
Right.
Um, but
So it was just a little two-lane road. There wasn't like a barrier or anything like that. There's no
no,
divider.
not no divider or anything. Yeah, 2 lane highway. And like I said, what made me more convinced was that it was at the part of the mountain pass where I was like on the other side, almost back in the valley. Does that make sense? Like it's
Sure.
like where the animal, like basically I know enough about like animal trails and stuff like that, like where like deer would cross or basically anything that was in that valley would probably be crossing the road or near the road. Like is the easiest way to get through the valley, I guess, is the best way to put it.
What are your thoughts on this subject? What do you think Bigfoot or Sasquatch is?
Well, I basically think that it probably is an ancestor of Gigantopithecus or something of the sort. I definitely think, I mean, in the area I'm in, I truly believe that there are, things out there per se that people think might have been extinct but are not. Um, and maybe an ancestor of that or and I also think there's just so much wilderness, and not only that, like it's just so plentiful here. Like there's high alpine lakes, there's rivers, there's tons of game. Like I mean, really an animal like that could definitely stay hidden for forever out there. It's out here. It's basically the area I saw it in is there's wilderness for hundreds of miles in all directions.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I truly uh, believe that there possibly are those types of things out in the woods, especially because I have also stumbled across, like tree breaks and stuff like that where it's just so it's unexplainable, and I don't know any other. I'm pretty versed in the animals and nature around here, and I don't know anything else that would make that. Like, I'm an amateur, I guess I would say, at like tracking prints and stuff like that. So I'm pretty good at telling between like a bear or a lion or a wolf and stuff like that. And I definitely know that those are around here, and so I don't doubt that there could be something like Sasquatch around here as well. The other thing that really confirmed it for me was just hearing, I think it's on BFRO that there are a ton of credible, like what I think are to be credible eyewitness accounts in this exact area. And in the area I'm at, it's definitely untouched by humans and has been for, you know, thousands of years. So I don't
Right.
know that something could be living in the high alpine where, humans don't really venture that much.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people have never lived in areas like that don't realize, there's a lot of skeptics that are sitting in New York City or something, in their armchair, uh, and they don't realize because they've never lived in that kind of area how much available land there is.
Yeah, and the other thing I've noticed just from living on a ranch is that animals are smart. Like they, especially an intelligent animal, like the animals around here, they don't even come near our house because they know we live here. Like I will venture out probably, you know, 500 feet past my house and I'll find prints, but they don't come close to us at all. And that's another thing that makes me just believe that obviously if there is Bigfoot out there and it's somewhat sentient and smart, that it would know how to stay hidden and also probably stay away from people,
Right.
um, just like any other normal animal. Um, and yeah, like you said, I mean, it's mind blowing how much vast wilderness there is here in valleys and untouched high alpine. And there's just, I have no doubt that something like Bigfoot could be alive and surviving and thriving and that we would never see it.
But you guys have a lot of mines and caves in your area too, right?
Yeah, so I'm basically in the gold rush area of Colorado, and there are mines everywhere. There's actually a mine like around 10 miles from me, on a mining road, and there's tons of trails that are not frequently used. And there's quite there's a little population here, but I mean, there's definitely more animals around here than people.
Right.
Um, and I even on our property, there's old mines that I've definitely seen, like bears using as habitat. Um, and there's just, I mean, so many places that any animal could live and thrive, like I said, with rivers, lakes, plentiful resources. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I know, and you don't have to go into this too much if you don't want to, but there is certainly seems to be a connection with this phenomenon in some cases with strange mystery lights. And you guys maybe have had a little bit of that in your area too, right?
Yeah, well, long story short, again, a thing with, as people call UFOs. I was one of those people that was like, oh, it could happen, but I've never seen it myself before I moved here. And ever since I moved here, I have definitely seen a plethora of lights in the sky that it's they appear to be stars, but they move. And I have seen it with my own eyes. I have videos and pictures of it, and just unexplained things like that, um, not really sure what to make of, but now I'm definitely a believer that there is, life out there other than us, because what I've seen in the air doesn't follow the laws of our physics. And also, my partner is very versed in aerodynamics and aviation, and uh, they also don't have any clue to what the lights could be. And they're quite frequent around this area. Again, we are in a quite unpopulated place. Um, and surprisingly enough, they look a lot like stars, only a lot brighter if you have a trained eye. And I know a lot of people don't look up at the sky often, but being out in the wilderness, we do. And it's very interesting, how frequent and common we see these types of things, to the point where the first time we saw a light in the sky that was moving, we got so scared, and even went as far as to call my mom because we were so freaked out. But now it's almost a nightly occurrence, and we've just kind of become accepted it as, we're not quite sure what it is, but it's definitely there. And I'm a firm believer in that as well, because I see it almost nightly.
Wow.
um, And like I said, it's just such erratic movements and things that don't really that defy our laws of physics. Um, and it's just very interesting.
What are do you have any other stories that you've heard in that area about Bigfoot?
Yeah, well, again, what made me really, I think about my sighting being a Bigfoot was there are two, so the area, like I said, where I saw it was probably about 45 minutes away from here by car. But I would say about maybe like 30 miles or so, give or take. Um, and I have uh, read about two sightings that are very, very close to the mine that's 10 miles away from me, kind of in the same direction. Basically, the mine and where I saw my sighting is connected by pure wilderness. Um, and I'm very convinced that the sighting I'm talking about or the sighting I read about is credible because it was three military officers, and I know it was a while, it was back, oh, I want to say that it was in like the 80s or 90s or something around then, like kind of a while ago, but they actually were these three military officers. There's a lot of military who live around here because there is um, an airport close here that I know the military uses. Um, and basically, the story I read about was that these three guys were camping off in the wilderness, again about 10 15 miles probably from where I live. Um, and they definitely saw, well, one of the men went to collect firewood and he saw a Sasquatch. He came back and told the other guys. The other guys didn't believe him. They were laughing at him. He was very clearly terrified and wanted to get out of there, but they wouldn't leave. They were just, laughing at him. And then they said, uh, they all tried to go to bed. The guy who saw it was like, I'm not gonna sleep. Then he frantically woke them up in the middle of the night, saying it's here. And the one guy who was telling the story, he said that that there was a bipedal, something just staring at them, like probably like 10 feet away from them. And they were by a high alpine lake that was near here, and they said they kept hearing splashes in the lake and that they could see another Sasquatch, like maybe fishing or doing something in the lake, and that it appeared that the one that was really close to them staring at them was kind of like keeping watch on them. And they all three woke up and saw it with their own eyes and were so scared that they kept their backs to each other basically, and like were afraid to move or do anything because they didn't want this thing to attack them. And it said it just stared at them for hours as they stared back, not sure what to do. And they knew it was alive because they said only sometimes it would like turn its head towards where the other one was to kind of like make sure it was still there, but keeping a watch on them to make sure they weren't going to do anything. And they said that lasted all night until it got to be like pretty much the morning, and it started getting lighter and lighter, and they could actually make it out to be a Bigfoot or Sasquatch, basically like 10 feet from them, staring at them. And they said after a while, it finally seemed like the one who was fishing or doing whatever on another part of the lake stopped. And once it stopped, it said it just turned and quickly strode, back towards the direction of where the one at the lake was. And these guys, are military and seem to be quite credible eyewitnesses. And basically, they said they were so scared that they sat there for probably another 2 hours to make sure that the Sasquatch were gone, and that they basically packed up right away. And like, they said it was the scariest hike of their entire lives, hiking back out, because they're probably a good 10-15 miles into the wilderness, so they had to do the long hike back. And that they basically made a pact when they got back to their car, because obviously they're military, and being in the military, it's you never want to seem crazy at all or have any kind of, never want anyone to think you have something wrong with your mind. So they made it a pact that they would never talk about it again. And that was, like I said, I think they were like in their 30s at the time. And the one guy who reported the story, he's obviously now retired in his like 60s. And he said that he kind of lost touch with the other guys, but he knows for sure that none of them have, well, pretty much as far as he knows, none of them have ever talked about it before. And he just felt that he wanted to share his story finally, now that he was like retired and older, and he just thought that it should be put out there.
Yeah.
And it kind of freaks me out, only because it is so close to where I live. And I do venture out in the woods by myself, not that far, obviously, alone. But I have definitely been to the area that they're talking about. And it's a very secluded, in the wilderness place. I say high alpine, but there's tons of valleys and rivers that go through there. And I mean, while it is secluded, it's definitely a place you can hike to. Knowing animals, I know that if they saw something right there, that it could very, very likely have been traveling the valleys to where I saw something as well.
Thanks for listening. If you have a story you'd like to share, you can find all the necessary links at SquatchMeNow.net. I hope you have a great night and a Happy New Year.